If you've spent your life feeling misunderstood, this video is not here to fix you. It's here to explain why you were never broken in the first place. There is a quiet frustration that comes from being constantly misread. People assume your silence means weakness. Your distance means arrogance. Your depth means complication. You try to explain yourself once, twice, maybe a few times, and then you stop. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you realize most people aren't really listening. They're only translating you into a version that feels comfortable to them. Carl Jung believed this experience was not accidental. In fact, he believed it was one of the most misunderstood signs of psychological strength. According to Jung, society is designed for the average mind. Shared values, shared behaviors, shared masks. The more closely you fit into those patterns, the easier life becomes socially. But the moment your inner world grows deeper than what society can easily label, misunderstanding begins. And here's the part most people never hear. Jung didn't see this as a flaw. He saw it as a sign of inner differentiation. Jung believed that human development isn't about fitting in. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness is uncomfortable for a world that prefers simplicity. When you start thinking independently, feeling deeply, and seeing beyond surface-level explanations, you naturally drift away from collective thinking. You don't do it on purpose. It just happens. And when it happens, people stop understanding you the way they used to. This is where most people panic. They try to explain themselves more. They simplify their thoughts. They dull their edges. They shrink their inner world to be accepted again. Jung warned against this. He believed that forcing yourself to be understood by everyone is one of the fastest ways to lose yourself. To Jung, being misunderstood often meant that a person was no longer living purely through the persona. The persona in Jungian psychology is the social mask. It's who you are in public. It's what makes you acceptable, predictable, and easy to categorize. Most people live almost entirely through this mask. That's why they're easily understood. They show only what society expects. But when someone begins to live more from their inner self, the persona weakens. The mask cracks. And when that happens, people don't know where to place you anymore. You don't fit the roles they assigned you. So they label you confusing, distant, strange, or difficult. Not because you changed into something worse, but because you changed into something more real. This is where misunderstanding becomes strength. When you're misunderstood, you are forced inward. You stop relying on external validation because it no longer works. Compliments feel shallow. Criticism feels inaccurate. Praise misses the point. Judgment feels irrelevant. Slowly, your sense of self stops being built by others and starts being built from within. Jung believed this inward shift was essential for psychological maturity. Most people never experience this stage. They remain dependent on being seen, approved, and understood by the group. But those who are misunderstood early in life often develop something rare: inner authority. They learn to trust their own perception even when no one else confirms it. This creates resilience that can't be taught. Jung observed that people who are misunderstood often have a heightened connection to the unconscious. They think symbolically. They notice patterns others overlook. They feel contradictions instead of choosing sides. This makes them poor participants in shallow conversations but powerful thinkers in solitude. Their minds are not designed for constant social performance. They are designed for depth, and depth always looks strange on the surface. This is why misunderstood people often feel lonely even when surrounded by others. Not because they lack social skills, but because their inner experiences don't translate easily into everyday language. Jung believed that language itself is limited. Not everything meaningful can be explained clearly. Some truths can only be felt, intuited, or lived through. When you live in that space, misunderstanding becomes inevitable. But here's where the hidden strength emerges. When people misunderstand you, they project onto you. They fill the gaps with their own fears, insecurities, and assumptions. Jung called this projection, and the person being projected onto often becomes more self-aware than the projector. Why? Because they are constantly forced to reflect, observe, and separate who they truly are from what others think they are. Over time, this creates psychological clarity. You begin to see that most opinions have little to do with you. You realize that misunderstanding says more about the observer than the observed. This awareness protects you from emotional manipulation. You become harder to control through shame, guilt, or approval. Jung believed this was a sign of individuation, the process of becoming a self-directed individual rather than a product of collective expectations. Individuation is not comfortable. Jung described it as a lonely path. The more individuated a person becomes, the fewer people truly understand them. But the trade-off is immense. You gain inner coherence. You stop performing. You stop apologizing for your nature. You stop seeking permission to exist as you are. This is why misunderstood people often appear calm during chaos. They've already been internally isolated. They've already faced the discomfort of standing alone psychologically. External chaos doesn't shake them as easily because their identity is not anchored to social approval. Jung also believed that misunderstood individuals often carry undeveloped potential. Not because they're superior, but because they operate outside conventional paths. Their talents don't always fit standard systems. Their thinking doesn't align with typical metrics of success. As a result, they may feel unseen for long periods of time. But when they finally find the right environment, their impact is often disproportionate. History quietly supports this idea. Many thinkers, artists, psychologists, and innovators were misunderstood in their own time. Not because they were trying to be different, but because they were ahead of the collective mindset. Jung believed that society evolves through these individuals, even though it often resists them first. Another hidden strength of being misunderstood is emotional self-sufficiency. When you stop expecting others to fully understand you, you stop over-explaining. You conserve energy. You become selective with your vulnerability. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you grounded. Your emotions stop being a performance and start becoming private sources of insight. Jung warned that trying too hard to be understood can lead to self-betrayal. You begin editing your truth to fit external comfort. Over time, this creates inner tension, anxiety, and a sense of falseness. Being misunderstood, while painful, often prevents this split. It forces you to stay aligned with yourself, even when it costs you social ease. There is also a paradox Jung pointed out. The more you understand yourself, the less you need to be understood by others. This inner understanding creates quiet confidence. You don't need to convince. You don't need to prove. You simply are. And paradoxically, this often attracts the right people later in life, those who resonate rather than analyze. Misunderstood people tend to develop rich inner lives. They reflect, journal, imagine, analyze, and question. Their solitude becomes productive rather than empty. Jung believed that solitude was not the absence of connection, but the presence of the self. When you are comfortable alone, misunderstanding loses its power to hurt you. This doesn't mean it never hurts. Jung never romanticized suffering. He simply believed that suffering, when consciously faced, transforms into meaning. Misunderstanding becomes a refining process. It strips away superficial connections and leaves behind what is authentic. If you've ever felt like you're too complex for simple labels, too deep for small talk, too quiet for loud rooms, or too thoughtful for fast judgments, Jung would not tell you to change. He would tell you to listen inward, to honor the tension, to accept that not everyone is meant to understand you, and that this is not a failure of communication, but a sign of differentiation. The hidden strength of being misunderstood is that it forces you to become your own witness, your own validator, your own anchor. In a world obsessed with being seen, you learn the rare skill of being whole without applause. And when you reach that point, misunderstanding no longer feels like rejection. It feels like confirmation that you are living from the inside out. Carl Jung believed that the goal of life was not happiness or approval, but meaning. And meaning is rarely understood by the crowd. It is discovered quietly, personally, and often in isolation. If you are misunderstood, it may simply mean you are walking a path that others haven't reached yet. and that, according to Jung, is not a weakness. It is a hidden strength.